He, a powerful and cynical man, visited a humble diner. She, the waitress, greeted him with warmth. He ordered rice and eggs. Upon tasting it, the homemade flavor transported him back to his childhood. Oswald realized true connection and simplicity were right there in that humble dish and genuine woman. Before we get started with the story, leave a comment and tell us what city you're watching from. Enjoy the story. The central air conditioning in the corporate building created a constant hum that had been the soundtrack to Oswald Mendes's life for years. From the 43rd floor of his headquarters in Chicago, he gazed out at the city he had helped build through his business ventures, but which now seemed strangely distant, as if observed through bulletproof glass. At 48, Oswald commanded an empire that began with a small food distribution company in rural Pennsylvania, a legacy of sweat and determination that he transformed into a technology and distribution conglomerate worth billions. His story was one that inspired magazine covers and motivational speeches. The poor kid from Pittsburgh who sold candy at school to help his mother pay the bills, who studied at night while working during the day, who slept in cramped dorm rooms during college and built his fortune brick by brick with his own two hands. But success, he discovered, came with a price that no business school teaches. With each million earned, it seemed that a small part of his soul drifted a little further away. True friends fell by the wayside, replaced by interested associates, professional flatterers, and business partners who smiled while calculating how much they could profit from their proximity. Oswald sighed heavily, adjusting the knot of his Italian tie, which cost more than many American families earn in a year. A cruel irony. When he couldn't afford a decent tie, he was genuinely happy. Now, surrounded by luxuries that he no longer even appreciated, he felt like a stranger in his own life. The intercom buzzed, interrupting his melancholy thoughts. The voice of Christine, his assistant of 10 years, echoed professionally through the device. "Mr. Oswald, your meeting with the board of directors is in 15 minutes. Do you need anything else?" "No, Christine. Thank you." His response came out drier than he intended. Even with Christine, who knew his habits better than anyone alive, he maintained a formal distance. She was efficient, discreet, reliable, but he never knew if she truly liked him or just the generous salary she received. Oswald walked to the panoramic window, observing the frantic traffic on the Kennedy Expressway below. Tiny cars carried people who probably had real problems, genuine worries, authentic relationships. People who knew the taste of home-cooked meals, who truly felt longing, who cried and laughed without calculating the financial consequences of each emotion. His cell phone vibrated in his pocket. A message from Edward, his younger brother, who managed the Philadelphia branch. "Bro, Mom would have been 75 today. Remember the eggs and toast she made when we got home from school?" The message came with an old photo yellowed with time, showing the two smiling boys next to a simple woman in a floral apron and a huge smile. Oswald felt a pang in his chest that he hadn't experienced in years. Helen had passed away 5 years ago, and he still blamed himself for having spent her last years so absent, always busy with mergers, acquisitions, expansions. She died in his penthouse apartment, surrounded by all the comforts that money can buy. But Oswald knew that she missed the simple house where she raised her sons, the small kitchen where she prepared miracles with few ingredients. "Of course I remember," he typed back, but the words seemed empty on the cell phone screen. How could he explain to Edward that he had forgotten not only the taste of that eggs and toast, but the feeling of truly being home? The board meeting was more of the same. Impressive numbers, optimistic projections, executives competing to see who could use the most business jargon in a single sentence. Oswald presided over everything with the mastery of someone who had been doing it for decades, but his mind wandered constantly. While they discussed the acquisition of 3 more distribution networks in the Southeast, he found himself thinking about the time when he personally knew every employee of the company, when he could distinguish by smell which dish was being prepared in the factory kitchen. After 2 hours of presentations and approvals, Oswald dismissed everyone with his usual courtesy. He was alone in the meeting room, contemplating the Italian mahogany table surrounded by genuine leather chairs. Everything there breathed opulence but also coldness. There wasn't a single personal photo, no object that told a story beyond financial success. Christine appeared at the door, tablet in hand. "Mr. Oswald, your afternoon agenda includes a visit to the revitalization project in the historic downtown." "The car is waiting," Oswald nodded mechanically. The project was yet another of the company's social responsibility initiatives, a way to improve the corporate image while gentrifying entire neighborhoods. He knew that his presence there was purely formal, just another photo for the company's annual report. But at that moment, looking out the window at the city stretching to the horizon, Oswald made an impulsive decision that surprised him. Instead of following the planned itinerary, he instructed the driver to leave him in a neighborhood he hadn't visited in decades, far from the glass towers and Michelin-starred restaurants. He wanted to walk the real streets, breathe the air of a Chicago that wasn't filtered by bulletproof glass and central air conditioning. Maybe there, in the midst of the raw authenticity of the city, he could find some vestige of the kid from Pittsburgh who still existed somewhere inside him. Maybe he would discover that the happiness he sought wasn't somewhere exotic and expensive, but hidden in the simplest corners of a life he had forgotten how to live. The driver looked in the rearview mirror, surprised by the unusual instructions, but obeyed without question. Oswald adjusted his tie one last time and prepared for a journey that he sensed would be more important than any business meeting he had ever attended. Chinatown was buzzing with an energy that Oswald had forgotten existed. He got out of the executive car in the middle of Grant Avenue, causing curious glances from passers-by who were surprised to see a man in an impeccable suit walking alone among the street food stalls and shops selling Asian goods. The contrast was stark. Him, with his imposing presence and clothes that cost more than minimum wage, in the middle of a crowd that lived the raw and authentic reality of the city. He walked aimlessly for a few blocks, simply absorbing the sounds, smells, and colors that he hadn't experienced unfiltered in years. Vendors shouted offers, children ran between the legs of adults, country music blared from some nearby store, mixing with lively conversations in English and Cantonese. It was chaotic, it was noisy, it was imperfect, but it was real in a way that his corporate world never managed to be. It was when hunger pangs hit that Oswald realized he had been walking for hours. His usual schedule included power lunches in upscale restaurants where each dish was a culinary work of art, served by waiters trained to anticipate every need. But there, lost among the streets of downtown, he was naturally drawn to the homey smell emanating from a small diner squeezed between a fabric store and a 24-hour drugstore. Mari's diner was nothing special. Walls painted faded yellow, a few formica tables with mismatched chairs, and a counter where a woman in her 30s worked with precise and graceful movements. She wore a colorful apron over a simple blouse, and her brown hair was tied in a practical bun that revealed an expressive and naturally welcoming face. Oswald hesitated at the door. He wasn't used to places where there wasn't a maitre d' to greet him, where there were no reserved tables or menus printed on expensive paper. But something about the woman's ease behind the counter, the way she chatted casually with regular customers, made him enter. "Good afternoon." "Welcome." Mari's voice had a genuine warmth that immediately caught his attention. She showed no surprise or discomfort with his obviously out-of-place appearance in the environment. She simply treated him as she would anyone who walked into her little culinary kingdom. "Good afternoon," Oswald replied, feeling strangely disarmed by the simplicity of the welcome. "What do you recommend?" Mari wiped her hands on her apron and smiled spontaneously. "Depends on what you're looking for. If you want something more elaborate, I can make a full plate special. But if you want something that really feeds the soul, I just made some eggs and toast. that's delicious. Simple ingredients, but made with a lot of love. Eggs and toast. The words echoed in Oswald's mind like a distant echo of his childhood. Eggs and toast, he repeated slowly, as if savoring the words. Yeah, Mari laughed softly. I know it might seem too simple for someone who's used to more sophisticated things. But sometimes, what seems simple is what tastes best, don't you think? There was a natural wisdom in her words that touched something deep in Oswald's chest. I'll have the eggs and toast, he said, surprising himself with the firmness of the decision. Perfect! You can sit at any table. It'll be ready in 5 minutes. Oswald chose a table near the counter from where he could watch Mari work. She moved around the small kitchen with a natural elegance, seasoning, tasting, adjusting the flavors, with the intuition of someone who learned to cook not in expensive culinary schools, but in the need to transform simple ingredients into moments of happiness for the people she loved. While she cooked, she chatted naturally with him about the neighborhood, about the day's business, about how the weather was nice for walking. She didn't ask intrusive questions about who he was or what he was doing there. She simply included him in the welcoming rhythm of her little world, as if he had always belonged in that place. When the plate arrived at the table, Oswald spent a few seconds just looking. It was exactly what the name promised: fluffy and fragrant toast, with creamy scrambled eggs on top, a pinch of green onions sprinkled like confetti, and a simplicity that bordered on perfection. There was no elaborate decoration, no artistic presentation. It was just honest food served on ordinary white plates. Oswald picked up the fork hesitantly, as if he was about to open a present whose contents could change his life. The first bite was cautious, almost ceremonial. But the moment the flavors touched his palate, something extraordinary happened. The world around him disappeared. The noise of the diner, the movement of the street, even the awareness of where he was completely dissolved. Oswald closed his eyes and was transported through decades, back to the small, hot kitchen of the house in Pittsburgh, where his mother, Helen, prepared exactly the same dish on afternoons when there wasn't much else in the pantry besides bread, eggs, and infinite love. He could smell the oil on the old stove again, hear his mother's loving voice calling him and Edward to the table, feel the comforting feeling of truly being home. In that eggs and toast of Mari's, there was something that no star chef had ever managed to put in their dishes: the authenticity of affection, the honesty of genuine care, the simple magic of transforming basic ingredients into unforgettable memories. When he opened his eyes, he realized that tears were silently rolling down his face. Mari watched him with an expression of gentle concern, without embarrassment, only with the naturalness of someone who understands that real food sometimes touches places we didn't even know were hurting. "Is everything all right?" she asked softly. Oswald nodded, unable to trust his own voice for a few moments. At that moment, sitting at a cheap Formica table in an unpretentious diner, eating a dish that cost less than he spent on a cup of coffee in his corporate building, Oswald Mendez experienced something he had forgotten was possible: the feeling of being exactly where he was supposed to be. Oswald spent the next 3 days in an unease that he couldn't explain even to himself. Sitting at his mahogany desk, signing multi-million-dollar contracts and making decisions that affected thousands of employees, his mind constantly wandered back to that small diner and the woman who had awakened in his chest a longing he thought he had buried forever. On Thursday morning, he made a decision that surprised even Christine. He cancelled all afternoon meetings, claiming a surprise inspection of the urban revitalization projects. It wasn't exactly a lie, but it wasn't the whole truth either. The truth was, he needed to go back to that place. He needed to confirm that the experience had been real and not just a product of his nostalgic imagination. This time, he asked the driver to drop him off a few blocks before Mari's diner. He wanted to walk, to prepare himself mentally for an encounter that, for reasons he didn't fully understand, seemed to have a disproportionate importance in his orderly and predictable life. When he pushed open the glass door of the diner, Mari looked up from the counter where she was organizing some spices, and her face lit up with a genuine smile of recognition. "Hi, you came back. That's great." Her joy seemed sincere without any artificiality. "So you liked the eggs and toast?" "I liked it a lot," Oswald replied, feeling strangely young in the face of that welcoming simplicity. "In fact, I haven't been able to stop thinking about it since then." Mari laughed, a crystalline sound that filled the small space. "Ah, that's the power of food made with love. My grandma always said that we season the food with what we're feeling at the time. If you're happy, the food tastes better. And were you happy when you made mine? I'm always happy when I cook for new people. Every customer who comes here brings a different story, you know? It's like I'm feeding not only the body, but also the soul of each one." Oswald sat at the same table as before, watching Mari as she worked. There was something mesmerizing in the way she moved, in the way she treated each ingredient with genuine respect, as if each carrot sliced, each spice added, was a small act of love. "Can I ask you something?" he said after a few moments of comfortable silence. "Of course." "How did you learn to cook like that, with so much naturalness?" Mari paused her hand movements and smiled with a hint of melancholy. "My mom died when I was 15. It was just me, my dad, and my younger brother, Junior. Someone had to cook, right? At first, I burned everything. It was a disaster. But then I started to remember her gestures, the way she stirred the pot, how she tested the salt. It was as if she was guiding me. Over time, it became more than a necessity. It became a way to take care of the people I love." The raw honesty of her answer touched Oswald deeply. "And your dad? Your brother?" "My dad works in a mechanic shop nearby. He's a simple, honest man who always did everything to make sure we didn't lack anything. Junior's in engineering school. I work here to help with his expenses. He's the smartest in the family. He deserves every opportunity I can give him." Oswald felt a pang in his chest at the natural generosity of that woman. When was the last time he had met someone who worked not to accumulate wealth, but to provide opportunities for others? "And you? What do you do for a living?" Mari asked while preparing another eggs and toast, even without him having ordered it. She seemed to sense that he had come back exactly for that. Oswald hesitated. How could he explain his life without sounding presumptuous or distant? "I work in business, distribution mainly." "What kind of distribution?" "Food. I have some companies that distribute food to restaurants, markets." He stopped before going into details that would reveal the true scale of his empire. "That's cool. So you understand the importance of food in people's lives. Food is much more than nutrition, right? It's affection, it's memory, it's connection." Oswald nodded, impressed with the philosophical depth that Mari naturally extracted from her everyday experience. "You're right. I think sometimes I forget that." "How so?" "I get too focused on the numbers, the logistics, the efficiency. And I forget that behind every product we distribute, there are moments like this. People sharing meals, creating memories." Mari placed the plate in front of him and leaned on the counter, studying him with genuine curiosity. "You seem like a person who carries a lot of weight on their shoulders. A lot of responsibility. How do you know?" "By the way you eat. Slowly, savoring, as if you're not used to having time to appreciate the simple things. And by your eyes, they have a sadness hidden, as if you've lost something important along the way." The precision of her observation left Oswald momentarily speechless. When was the last time someone really saw him? Not just his position or his wealth, but him, Oswald, the man behind all the titles. "You're very perceptive," he said finally. "It comes with the territory. Whoever works serving food ends up serving much more than that. We become unofficial psychologists for our customers." From that conversation onwards, Oswald established a routine that his partners and employees considered at the very least eccentric. 2, sometimes 3 times a week, he appeared at Mari's diner, always in the middle of the afternoon when the business was quieter and he could chat quietly with Mari. He created an official excuse about closely monitoring the revitalization projects in the area. But the truth was simpler and more complicated. He needed those moments. He needed Mari's authenticity, The honesty of their conversations, the way she made him remember who he was before he became who everyone expected him to be. Marie, in turn, began to save special ingredients for when he appeared. Not just eggs and toast, but other simple recipes that she prepared with the same care. A shepherd's pie, a chicken noodle soup, sugar cookies that she baked herself in the early morning. Each dish was a small revelation, a connection to a simplicity that he had long lost. The other regular customers of the diner began to notice the well-dressed man who appeared regularly and talked at length with Marie. Some made joking comments, others showed curiosity, but Marie always discouraged them with natural diplomacy, protecting the privacy of those conversations that had become precious to both of them. Oswald realized that he looked forward to those encounters as anxiously as a child looks forward to recess. For the first time in decades, he had something on his agenda that wasn't an obligation, but a genuine pleasure. And more importantly, for the first time in years, he felt that someone liked his company for who he was, not for what he owned. Oswald's routine lasted exactly 6 weeks before his carefully constructed world began to crumble. It was on a rainy Tuesday that Richard Vasconcelos, his partner of 15 years and vice president of the board, entered his office unannounced, carrying a manila envelope and an expression that Oswald knew well. It was the face Richard made when he discovered something he considered a threat to the business. "Oswald, we need to talk." Richard closed the door behind him with more force than necessary. "Good morning, Richard. What have we got today?" Oswald tried to keep his tone casual, but something in the air of the office had changed. "We've got this." Richard threw the envelope on the mahogany desk, causing some photos to scatter like cards from a deck revealing a losing hand. Oswald looked at the photographs with growing horror. There he was, entering Marie's diner, chatting animatedly with Marie, smiling in a way he hadn't smiled in years. The images had been taken from different angles on different days, meticulously documenting his secret visits. A private investigator, Richard sat in the armchair in front of the desk, crossing his legs with the predatory elegance of someone about to deliver checkmate. "I hired him when I started to notice your strange absences, your mood swings, that different way about you lately. You had me investigated." Oswald's voice came out lower and more dangerous than he intended. "I had behaviors investigated that could compromise our company." Richard pointed to the photos. Oswald Mendez, CEO of a billion-dollar conglomerate, frequenting a neighborhood diner, developing an obsession with a waitress. Do you have any idea what that could generate in terms of scandal? Scandal? Oswald felt the anger rising in his chest. Scandal is me talking to a decent person. Scandal is you exposing yourself like this. Think about the shareholders, Oswald. Think about our corporate image. What will they think when they find out you're spending your afternoons in a cheap diner, drooling over a woman who works flipping burgers? Don't refer to her that way. Oswald stood up, the chair scraping on the hardwood floor. For God's sake! Are you hearing what you're saying? Richard also stood up, gesturing with exasperation. This woman has clearly found out who you are. It's obvious she's taking advantage of the situation. How many have tried this before, Oswald? How many Maris have passed through your life, pretending to be genuinely interested? Richard's words hit Oswald like physical blows, not because they were true, but because they echoed all the doubts that he himself had tried to stifle in recent days. What if Marie really knew who he was from day one? What if all that naturalness, all that authenticity that he valued so much was just a well-executed performance? You don't know her, he murmured, but his voice sounded less convinced than he would have liked. And do you know her? Oswald, for your own good, for the good of the company we built together, you need to stop this madness. End this obsession before it turns into a public scandal. That night, Oswald couldn't sleep. He stood on the balcony of his penthouse apartment, watching the city lights and reliving every conversation, every smile, every moment shared with Marie. Had he been naive? Were all those moments that seemed so genuine just the result of a convincing act? The doubt was like a slow poison, contaminating his most precious memories. The eggs and toast that had made him cry with nostalgia, had it been prepared especially to manipulate his emotions. The conversations about family, dreams, and simplicity, had they been calculated to touch exactly on his vulnerabilities? He spent 3 days without appearing at the diner, testing himself, trying to prove that he could live without those moments that had become so important. But the abstinence only made things worse. Every corporate meeting seemed more empty, every meal in expensive restaurants more tasteless, every conversation with colleagues more artificial. On the 4th day, he decided to go back. He needed to look into Mari's eyes and discover the truth, even if it destroyed him. When he entered the diner, Mari was serving an elderly customer, laughing at some joke he had told. When she saw him, her face lit up with the same genuine joy as always. "Hey, you disappeared!" I was starting to get worried. Did something happen? The worry in her voice seemed real, but Oswald now questioned even his own perceptions. "I had some complicated days at work. I imagine. You work with distribution, right? It must be a lot of stress, a lot of responsibility." Oswald studied her carefully. Was there something in her speech, something different? "Mari, can I ask you a question?" "Sure. You really don't know who I am." The question caught Mari completely off guard. She stopped drying her hands on her apron and looked at him with a confused expression. "What do you mean?" "You're Oswald. You work with food distribution." "Why should I know anything else?" "Because I'm..." He started to speak, but the words died in his throat. If she really didn't know, telling the truth would change everything forever. If she knew and was pretending, confronting her would also change everything. Either way, that moment of purity, that bubble of authenticity that he had found, was about to burst. "You're what?" Mari approached, lightly touching his arm with her usual naturalness. "Oswald, are you okay?" "You're pale." Her touch, so simple and warm, made his defenses crumble. At that moment, looking into her worried and honest eyes, Oswald realized that he had allowed himself to be contaminated by the paranoia of his world. Mari was real. Her feelings were real. But now he had planted a seed of distrust that would grow between them, even if he didn't want it to. "It's nothing," he lied. "Just work, really." But everything had changed. For the first time since he met her, Oswald couldn't completely relax in her presence. He watched every word, every gesture, looking for signs of deception that he knew probably didn't exist. And worst of all, he realized that Mari had also noticed his change, saw the growing confusion in her eyes as she tried to understand what had happened to the man who came to find peace in her diner. The paradise he had found was beginning to crack, and Oswald didn't know if he still had the strength to fight for it. The following days were a silent torture. Oswald continued to visit the diner, but it was as if an invisible wall had risen between him and Mari. She tried to maintain her usual naturalness, but he noticed the growing confusion in her eyes, the way she hesitated before speaking, as if walking on shards of glass without understanding how they had gotten there. It was on a Thursday, when Oswald was finishing yet another eggs and toast consumed in tense silence, that the diner door opened with excessive energy. A tall man, around 60 years old, with grease-stained hands and a wide smile that lit up the entire room, entered carrying a toolbox. "Mari, honey, I came to take a look at that stove that's making a funny noise." "Dad!" Mariana's face transformed completely, radiating a pure joy that Oswald hadn't seen in days. "I'm so glad you came. This is Mr. Oswald, who I told you about." "Oswald, this is my dad, Tony." Tony wiped his hand on his shirt before extending it to Oswald, who stood up politely. "Nice to meet you, Tony. The pleasure's all mine. Mari can't stop talking about you. Dad, there's a new customer who loves my eggs and toast. Dad, there's a very polite gentleman who always asks for seconds on dessert." Tony laughed heartily. "She gets all excited when you come here." Oswald felt something stir in his chest. "She talks about me? Talks?" And Mari isn't one to talk much about customers. "But you? She says you have a sadness in your eyes that reminds her of her own mother when she was sick." Says her food cheers you up in a special way. Mariana turned red. Dad, stop. You're being embarrassing. Embarrassing nothing. It's true. Tony turned to Oswald with the frankness of someone who had worked with his hands his whole life. You know, Mr. Oswald, my Mari has a special gift. Since she was little, she always knew when someone needed extra care. When her mother got sick, she prepared special soups, teas, little things that made the pain go away a little bit. And after Helen passed, she did the same thing for me and Junior, always taking care of others. The mention of the name Helen made Oswald jump slightly. Helen? Yes, my wife. Helen Maria da Silva. Why? Oswald felt the world spin slightly. Sorry, it's just that my mother was also named Helen. What a coincidence! And I bet your mother also cooked with a lot of love, right? Helenas are like that. They seem to be born knowing that food is the simplest way to show affection. At that moment, observing the natural interaction between father and daughter, seeing how Tony spoke of Mariana with genuine pride and paternal concern, all the doubts planted by Richard began to unravel. There was no way to fake that kind of family dynamic. There was no way to stage decades of shared history, of small gestures of mutual care, of unconditional love. Tony began to examine the stove, chatting naturally as he worked. Mari, did you talk to Mr. Johnson about the rent? I did, Dad. He said there's nothing he can do. The landlord wants to raise it 50%. If I don't agree by the end of the month, he's going to have to give the lease to someone else. Oswald felt his stomach clench. 50%? Mariana sighed, trying to disguise her worry. Yeah, it's tough. The neighborhood is getting more expensive. Rents are rising a lot. Many old businesses have already closed because of it. But can you afford it? I don't know. Mariana's honesty was painful. I'll have to do the math carefully, but I don't think so. Maybe I'll have to look for another place, cheaper, further away. Tony stopped working on the stove. Mari, you can't give up like that. Your mother would be proud to see what you've built here. This place has her soul. It has your soul. I know, Dad, but I can't perform miracles. If the money isn't there, it isn't there. Oswald watched that conversation, feeling a growing urgency in his chest. Here was the definitive proof of Mariana's authenticity. She was facing a real financial crisis. She could easily use her proximity to him to ask for help or insinuate her situation. But she chose to keep her difficulties private, fighting with dignity and independence. Mr. Oswald, Tony turned to him as he closed the toolbox. Can I give you some fatherly advice? Of course. My Mari is special. She has a heart that doesn't fit in her chest and an honesty that sometimes even hurts. If she liked you, it's because she saw something good in your soul. And she doesn't make mistakes about those things. Never has. After Tony left, promising to return next week to take a look at the electrical system, Mariana and Oswald were alone in an atmosphere charged with unspoken things. Mariana, Oswald began, feeling that he needed to somehow repair the damage he had done in recent days. I need to apologize to you. Apologize for what? For having doubted you. For having let other people make me question your sincerity. You didn't deserve that. Mariana looked at him with those honest eyes that he had learned to value. Oswald, I don't know what happened between us in these last few days, but I felt that you were different. More distant. I thought maybe I had done something wrong. You didn't do anything wrong. The whole problem is in me, in my complicated life. In the people who think they know what's best for me. What kind of complication? Oswald hesitated. There was the opening to tell the whole truth, to reveal his identity and perhaps solve all her problems with a simple check. But he also knew that doing so would forever change the purity of that connection they had built. One day I'll explain everything to you. I promise, just give me some more time. Mariana nodded, and for the first time in days, smiled at him with the same warmth as before. In that smile, Oswald saw the confirmation of everything his heart already knew. She was real. Her feelings were real, and he had almost lost everything because of the paranoia and distrust that his world of wealth and power had planted in his soul. But the bomb exploded on a Monday morning, when Oswald was still having coffee in his apartment. Christine called at 7:15, her voice loaded with an urgency that he had never heard before. "Mr. Oswald, you need to see the news, now." Oswald turned on the television and felt the world collapse around him. On the screen, his face appeared next to a photo of Mariana taken from social media, with a headline in bold letters that burned his eyes: "Billionaire CEO harasses diner waitress. Abuse of power or secret romance." The reporter, with that dramatic intonation typical of morning scandals, narrated a distorted version of the story that made Oswald seem like a millionaire predator taking advantage of a vulnerable woman. The photographs that Richard had shown weeks ago were now in the hands of the press, edited and contextualized in a way to suggest stalking, harassment, exploitation of the difference in social classes. Sources close to the company confirmed that Oswald Mendez, CEO of the Mendez Group, has been obsessively frequenting a small diner downtown, developing a fixation on the young waitress Mari Silva. The girl's family, who lives in precarious financial circumstances, has reportedly been approached by the businessman in attempts to get closer. Oswald turned off the television with trembling hands. His cell phone wouldn't stop ringing. Messages were pouring in. His name was trending on social media, with thousands of people commenting on another case of powerful harassment. The worst part was that, even distorted, the story had enough elements of truth to be convincing. He really had developed an obsession with Mari. He really had tried to get closer to her using subterfuge. He really was a billionaire man courting a woman in a vulnerable financial situation. He arrived at the office facing a siege of journalists, elevators full of reporters, news vans parked in front of the building, flashes exploding in his face as he tried to get to his own office. The questions came like stabs. Is it true that you are harassing a waitress? How do you respond to the accusations of abuse of power? Will the company make an official statement? Inside the building, the situation was no better. Employees looked at him with a mixture of embarrassment and morbid curiosity. Whispered conversations stopped when he passed through the hallways. The atmosphere was of a corporate funeral. Richard was waiting for him in the office, accompanied by 3 other members of the board and 2 lawyers. The expression on their faces spoke for itself. "Oswald, this is a disaster," Richard began bluntly. "The company's shares have already fallen 12% since the market opened. The shareholders are in a panic. We have 3 major clients threatening to break contracts. We warned you," said Helen Rodriguez, Director of Corporate Relations. "We warned about the risks of inappropriate personal exposure. Now we have an institutional image crisis on our hands." One of the lawyers, a 60-year-old man with the coldness of someone who professionally dealt with scandals, opened a folder. "Mr. Mendez, our recommendation is clear. You need to temporarily step down from the presidency of the company until this case is resolved. It's the only way to protect the corporation from further damage." "Step down?" Oswald felt as if he had been punched in the stomach. "It's temporary," Richard tried to soften. "Just until the storm passes. You built this company, Oswald, but now it's bigger than any of us. We have responsibilities to thousands of employees, to shareholders, to the entire market." Oswald looked around the meeting table, seeing faces he had known for years, people who had worked alongside him to build the empire that they now threatened to take from his hands. The irony was cruel. He had spent decades isolating himself from people out of distrust, and now the only people he trusted were abandoning him at the first sign of trouble. "And what about the other person involved?" he asked, unable to pronounce Murray's name. Yes. "The waitress." The lawyer consulted his notes with clinical indifference. "Our communications team is already working on a strategy to minimize the damage. We will suggest that she was the victim of a unilateral obsession, that she never encouraged the approach. This should protect both her and the company. You're going to lie about her." "We will present the version that best protects everyone involved," the lawyer corrected. Oswald stood up abruptly, the chair falling backward. "Get out, all of you. Get out of my office now." "Oswald, be reasonable." Richard tried to intervene. "Get out!" When he was alone, Oswald approached the panoramic window that for years had been his contemplative refuge. Down below, the journalists continued to camp out, waiting for any movement from him. On social media, which Christine continued to monitor and report via messages, hashtags like Jaco Justice for Mari and Naka CEO Harrison dominated the discussions. The phone rang. It was Edward, his brother. "Bro, what's this madness that's on TV?" "Edu, his voice cracked. "I think I've lost everything." "What do you mean, lost everything?" "Oswald, talk to me straight. What's going on?" Through tears that he hadn't shed in years, Oswald told everything. The loneliness that consumed him, the encounter with Marie, the purity of that connection, how that simple woman had given him back a humanity that he thought he had lost forever. And now, how everything was being destroyed by the very people he trusted to protect his life. "And her? How is she?" Edward asked. "I don't know. I can't even imagine. She's probably being harassed by journalists, having her privacy invaded, being painted as an opportunist or as a victim, all because of me. Oswald, you need to go to her. You need to talk to her." "How?" "There's a crowd of reporters at the door of the building. If I show up near her now, it'll only make the situation worse. They'll say I'm trying to intimidate her, buy her off, I don't know." At that moment, sitting alone in his mahogany office, surrounded by the trophies of a lifetime of success that now meant less than nothing, Oswald realized that he had reached rock bottom. He had lost the company he built with his own hands. He had lost the trust of the people he considered allies. And worst of all, he had destroyed the life of the only person who had offered him something real and true in decades. Giving up had never seemed so tempting. Maybe it would be better to accept the dismissal, sell his shares, disappear from public life. Let Mari rebuild her life away from the toxicity that he had brought to her. Accept that some people are simply not born to find happiness, that success sometimes demands unaffordable prices. Oswald rested his head on the cold mahogany desk and for the first time in his adult life wondered if it was worth continuing to fight. It was Christine who brought the news that changed everything. She entered the office the next morning carrying the tablet with an expression that mixed concern and indignation. "Mr. Oswald, you need to see this." Her voice trembled slightly. "It's about Mari." Oswald lifted his head from the desk where he had spent the night, still wearing the same clothes as the day before. "What is it?" "The reporters went to the diner. She tried to open this morning, but..." Christine hesitated. It was a chaos. A crowd of journalists, cameras, aggressive questions. She had an anxiety attack in front of everyone. Oswald felt his heart stop. "What do you mean?" Christine showed him the tablet. On the screen, an amateur video filmed by some passerby showed Mari outside the diner, surrounded by a dozen reporters shouting questions simultaneously. "Is it true that you are being harassed by the CEO? How much did he offer you to stay quiet? Are you afraid of him?" In the video, Mari tried to answer, tried to explain, but her voice was constantly interrupted. Oswald could see the desperation growing on her face, the way her hands trembled, how she looked around for an escape that didn't exist. At one point, she simply broke down, starting to cry uncontrollably while repeating, "He didn't do anything wrong. You don't understand, he's a good person." It was then that her father appeared. Tony, the simple and honest man that Oswald had met days ago. In the video, he pushed his way through the journalists with determination, wrapping Mari in his arms and leading her into the diner while shouting to the cameras, "Leave my daughter alone!" She did nothing to deserve this. Oswald watched the video 3 times in a row, each viewing increasing the fury that grew in his chest. Marie, who had never asked for anything other than some genuine company during her lonely afternoons, was being torn apart publicly for something he had caused. "There's more," Christine said softly. "The diner was vandalized during the night. Someone threw rocks at the window. They spray-painted the wall with horrible words. And the property owner, he terminated the lease, said he doesn't want any trouble on his property. They kicked her out." "Effectively, yes. She lost her business, lost her source of income. She's been persecuted by the media." Christine paused. Mr. Oswald, sorry for the audacity, but this can't continue like this. This girl doesn't deserve to pay for other people's mistakes. Oswald was silent for long minutes, processing the grotesque injustice of the situation. Mari had been punished for being kind. She had lost everything for having offered genuine friendship to a lonely stranger. She was paying the price for his lack of courage to be honest from the beginning. Christine, I need you to do something for me. Of course, sir. I need you to find Mari's address. And I need you to schedule a press conference for tomorrow morning. Big one with all the major news outlets. I want the grand ballroom of the Waldorf Astoria. Christine looked at him in surprise. A press conference? Sir, the lawyer said for you not to make any public statements until the lawyers are fired. Oswald's voice had changed completely. It was no longer the voice of a defeated man, but the voice of the leader who had built an empire from scratch. All of them. Richard, too. I want you to convene an emergency board meeting for this afternoon. Sir, I'm going to regain control of my company, Christine, and I'm going to fix this whole mess. Oswald spent the rest of the day meticulously planning each move. First, he called Edward, asking him to come to Chicago immediately. Then he contacted Mario Santos, one of the best criminal lawyers in the country, known for defending cases considered impossible. Mario, I need you to take my case. But it's not a common criminal case. I need to sue my own company for defamation. I need to clear the name of an innocent person, and I need to do it publicly, in front of the entire country. Oswald, is this professional or personal? It's both. And it's the most important thing I've ever done in my life. In the afternoon, he faced the board with a determination he hadn't felt in months. Richard tried to take control of the meeting, arguing that Oswald was emotionally compromised to make corporate decisions. You're right, Oswald said, surprising everyone. I'm emotionally compromised. For the first time in decades, I'm emotionally compromised with something that really matters. He stood up, walking to the window from where he could see the city he had conquered. You want to remove me from the presidency of the company I built with my own hands because you think my personal life represents a corporate risk. Very well, I accept the challenge. Oswald turned to face each of the board members. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to make a complete public statement about everything that happened. I'm going to tell the whole truth. And then you'll find out if a company can survive when it tries to destroy the integrity of the person who created it. Oswald, you can't do this. Richard stood up alarmed. You're going to destroy everything we've built together. No, Richard. You already did that when you decided that my humanity was a corporate problem to be solved. That night, Oswald did something he hadn't done in years. He cooked for himself. In his Italian marble kitchen, he prepared a simple eggs and toast, trying to recapture the flavor that had changed his life. Each movement was a silent prayer, each seasoning a promise that he wouldn't let the purity of that moment be destroyed by cowardice. While eating alone in his penthouse apartment, looking at the city lights, Oswald knew that the next day would define not only his future, but also his ability to look in the mirror for the rest of his life. It was no longer about saving his company or his reputation. It was about proving to himself, to Mari, and to the world that there were still people willing to fight for the truth, even when it cost everything they had built in life. The war was about to begin, and for the first time in decades, Oswald Mendez knew exactly what he was fighting for. The ballroom of the Waldorf Astoria had never hosted such a tense press conference. More than 100 journalists occupied the chairs. Cameras from dozens of networks pointed at the small stage where Oswald prepared for the most important moment of his life. Mario Santos was by his side, but both knew that no legal strategy could replace the raw courage that this moment demanded. Good morning, Oswald began, his voice echoing through the silent hall. My name is Oswald Mendez, and I come here today not as the CEO of a company, but as a man who needs to tell a truth that I should have told weeks ago. He took a deep breath. Looking directly into the cameras, 2 months ago, I was the loneliest man in America. I had everything that money can buy and nothing that really matters. I lived in a gilded bubble, surrounded by people who flattered or feared me, but no one who really knew me. The journalists leaned forward, realizing that this would not be a common corporate conference. It was then that I met Marie Silva, not because she knew who I was or how much I have in the bank. She met me as Oswald, a sad man who walked into her diner looking for something I didn't even know I was looking for. Authenticity. His voice began to waver. Marie offered me a plate of eggs and toast that made me cry because it reminded me of the taste of childhood, of my mother's love, of a simplicity that I had lost decades ago. The silence in the room was absolute. For 6 weeks, I visited that diner not to harass or stalk someone, but because there, in those 20 minutes of genuine conversation, I remembered who I really was before I became just a number in the ranking of the richest men in the country. Oswald paused, drying his eyes discreetly. Marie never knew who I was, never asked for anything, never insinuated financial interest. She offered me the only thing I couldn't buy, true friendship. And I, a coward that I was, didn't have the courage to be honest with her from the beginning. A murmur ran through the audience. Oswald raised his hand, asking for silence. Yesterday, I saw an innocent woman being torn apart publicly for something I caused. I saw her lose her livelihood, her dignity, her peace, all because she had the generosity to be kind to a lonely stranger. His voice now came out firm and determined. And that stops. Now, Oswald turned to the main cameras. Marie Silva is the most honest person I have met in my adult life. She is everything that is best in humanity. Generous, hardworking, honest, courageous. If anyone in this story deserves to be questioned about their values and their intentions, that someone is me, not her. He opened his suit jacket and took out an envelope. Here I have the deed transferring ownership of a commercial property on Grant Avenue, number 847, which from today belongs entirely to Marie Silva. It's not charity. It's not compensation for damages. It's recognition of the value of a person who taught me that true wealth has nothing to do with money. The audience exploded in exclamations and flashes. Oswald waited for the silence to return. Furthermore, I am announcing the creation of the Helen Maria Foundation in honor of my mother and Marie's mother, which will support small culinary entrepreneurs who keep alive the tradition of food made with love. Marie will be the first beneficiary, but not the last. A journalist raised his hand. And what about your position in the company? Yesterday, my board of directors tried to remove me from the presidency because they considered my humanity a corporate risk. Today, I bought all the outstanding shares of the company. Now, who decides what is a risk is me. Oswald smiled for the first time in days. And I can guarantee that a company that cannot distinguish between humanity and weakness does not deserve to exist. When Oswald arrived at Grant Avenue, a small crowd had formed in front of the place where Marie's diner used to be. But this time, they weren't aggressive journalists. They were neighbors, regular customers, ordinary people who had watched the press conference and came to show support. Marie was there next to her father with swollen eyes, but a shy smile on her face. When she saw Oswald, she walked towards him, and for the first time since they met, there were no barriers between them. You didn't need to do all this, she said softly. Yes, I did. I needed to because you gave me back something that I thought I had lost forever. The ability to feel that there are things in life that are worth more than money or power. Marie hugged him, a simple and honest hug that was photographed by dozens of cell phones, but that, this time, no one misinterpreted. It was the hug of two people who had found in each other the proof that there are still genuine connections in an increasingly artificial world. 6 months later, the new Marie's Diner had become a phenomenon, not because of glamour or sophistication, but because it maintained exactly what it always had: food made with love, honest conversations, and the ability to make anyone feel at home. Oswald continued to be a regular customer, but now as a true friend, not as a lonely stranger. And every afternoon, when he tasted that eggs and toast that changed his life, Oswald remembered that the most authentic happiness sometimes comes wrapped in the simplest things: an honest dish, a genuine conversation, and the courage to be vulnerable enough to accept love when it arrives disguised as simplicity. Dear listeners, we hope that the journey of Oswald and Mari has touched your hearts as much as it has touched ours. To continue exploring these stories that remind us of the beauty of human authenticity, we have prepared a special playlist with equally exciting narratives about encounters that transform lives. You can find it by clicking here next to. If this story inspired you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and leave your like. Each gesture of you motivates us to continue bringing stories that celebrate the complexity and beauty of the human experience. Every day, we share new narratives that explore the transformative power of genuine encounters. Don't miss our next content and tell us in the comments which part of Oswald's story moved you the most. Until next time,